If you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz, and I'm here today to review the 1994 Star Trek film Star Trek Generations, starring Patrick Stewart, Jonathan Frakes, William Shatner, and Malcolm McDowell, directed by David Carson. Generations is what I would call a bridge film. It's a film that gives you the original characters, but they're used to introduce you to a new set of characters. That is because after Kirk, played by William Shatner, is presumed dead after he's been exposed by a giant energy field, we jump over 70 years later when Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, learns that a survivor from the accident, Dr. Soren, played by Malcolm McDowell, plans to enter the field by destroying a neighboring star. Picard finds he needs to collaborate with an unlikely ally, in quotations, in order to stop him. You can probably guess who that ally is. Before I really get into the story and the characters and everything when it comes to this movie, I want to say first, right off the bat, the thing that you will notice if you watch the other 6 films and you go to this one, is that there is a very clear visual upgrade to the rest of the film. It definitely feels brighter. It seems like it's much cleaner than I would say the last 6 films were, and that the sets and the graphics and the sets and the special effects are much better, especially when you get into action sequences. A lot of the space sequences are a lot better, and there's a certain scene in the film that involves the Enterprise that I think is very well done, for the time at least. But also that the way the film is shot is a very big step up as well. But let's get into characters and let's get into story, which honestly is why I'm liking the Star Trek movies, is that I think the story and the characters are probably the best strength that the films have. And I think this film has one of the better villains since Khan. Soren, who is played by Malcolm McDowell, does a very good job playing him. I don't think he's that in-depth of a character, but he is interesting in how he goes about things and what the story has him doing throughout. He sides with a Klingon faction throughout the entire film, while he's trying to get into that energy field that's called the Nexus. And I won't get into what's so special about the Nexus, but it does play into the rest of the film in a very specific way. But honestly, I think the villain is probably one of the best parts of this film, because Malcolm McDowell just plays him very well. So here's the main problem I have with the film. For a bridge towards a new cast, this film is not very effective in the slightest. What I think they try to do is, in order for you to get comfortable with the movie, they want to show the original cast and then transition to the new cast. The best way to do that is to show the old cast, but then introduce the new cast and let you get to know them. And that's a big problem, because the film really does not let you get to know any of the characters. I think the 2 most in-depth characters that you meet in this film are Jean-Luc Picard, who is the captain, and Data. Neither of them are all that deep or really well realized. Data is interesting in a way because he's an android, and there's this whole subplot where he has an emotion chip and it's malfunctioning in his head, or it's not really working with him very well. But with Picard, the problem is that all you see him do is sulk and be angry. And I think the film wants you to feel bad for him, but that requires a previous attachment to him, which, again, I don't have since I've never watched any of the Star Trek The Next Generation. So if you came into the film like me, and you have no previous experience with these characters, I think you're going to have a hard time sympathizing or really getting to know any of these characters. With that said, I think the visual upgrade and the villain of the film, I think, is enough for me to actually like the film. It's also a fun film, it's entertaining, but compared to the films from the last 6, namely Wrath of Khan and the last one that we did, which is Undiscovered Country, I think it's a step down, and it's kind of a disappointment on that end. So here is a footnote for Star Trek Generations, and it's going to dive into what I said in the third point, which is, once again, previous experience with the characters will affect your enjoyment. Honestly, like I said in the review, one of the best things about Star Trek are the characters. Because let's face it, if it's just a film about space militarism, it's not that interesting, but the characters are what makes it compelling. Spock, Kirk, Scotty, Bones, like those guys, they're the reasons why I actually like the Star Trek movies. And it just felt like in this movie, if you are not aware of what Picard is like, or any of the characters are like, you're just not going to get into it as much as someone who is into those characters and who has that previous experience. So keep that in mind if you're going to watch this movie. I still think it's a good movie. I just don't think it's as good as it could have been, but I get the feeling that if I had previous experience with these characters, I might enjoy it a little more. But since I don't, I have to play it off that way. So that's how I feel. So overall, I'm going to recommend Star Trek Generations. I think it's a fun movie. It's entertaining overall. But when it comes to the character work for Picard and the crew, it left a lot to be desired. Honestly, the best characters in this film are Soren and Kirk, which is kind of sad because Kirk is not in the movie all that much. But I think Soren is the most interesting character in the film, and he just carries the film towards the end. I think visually the film is a lot better. I think it's the best in terms of visual from all the Star Trek films so far. I think that it's got a nice clean look to it. I think the graphics and the special effects are very well done in this movie. So I think it's an entertaining film. But if you're not familiar with Star Trek at all, like I have been, you're going to find it lacking, especially if you went through the last 6, where you got to know the previous set of characters and you've grown attached to them, which I did. I like the characters from the previous 6. I just hope that the characters are better realized in the next movie. So overall, yes, I will recommend Star Trek Generations. Check it out on Paramount Plus if you have it, and I hope that the next one is better.
Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to.
Alright, so for Tuesday, I'll be reviewing The Cabin in the Woods, directed by Drew Goddard. On Thursday, me and Zero are going to be reviewing Zombieland, directed by Ruben Fleischer. And on Saturday, we're going to just continue on with the Star Trek movies. And the next one is Star Trek First Contact, directed by Jonathan Frakes. Again, like I mentioned in the review, I really hope the characters are much better realized in this version, because that seems to be the weakness that I had from Generations, but we'll see how that goes. So, on Tuesday, I'll be reviewing The Cabin in the Woods, directed by Drew Goddard. Thursday, Zombieland, directed by Ruben Fleischer. And Saturday, Star Trek First Contact, directed by Jonathan Frakes. I am the Wiz, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.